Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. We're so happy to have you joining us today for another one of our virtual programs. We know getting to the park can be pretty difficult, so we want to continue bringing the park to you through a series of longer 45-minute virtual programs, as well as our 15-minute weekly walks, which we'll be taking one of today. Thank you again so much for joining us. And thank you for attending a weekly walk of the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir with me, Ryan, on today, March 2nd, 2022. We love doing these weekly walks in which we'll be together for about 15 minutes. And we're going to see a handful of photos that were taken by myself here in Central Park over the last week. Of course, I have a lot to show you in only a little bit of time, so we'll jump right into our weekly walk today on March 2nd. Now, as we begin, of course, you're probably familiar with us here at the Central Park Conservancy, the nonprofit caretakers of Central Park. Our mission for Central Park is really to preserve and celebrate this beautiful park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. Now, as we move through our little weekly walk today, we, of course, are using Zoom. So if you would like to say hello, please use a chat feature. Let us know where you're joining us from, or maybe share a favorite memory you might have of Central Park. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature, and my colleague Jose will be on the back end answering any questions that you might have. The last thing that you're going to see pop up are going to be some visitor polls that I'll launch throughout the tour today. Once everybody has voted in those polls, I can share the results and submit them so we can all see what we're thinking. You will also see some transcripts that are popping up on the page. You do have the options to close those if you would not like, but we are going to keep them open for those that might be a little hard of hearing. I also talk really fast, so it might be a little bit helpful to keep up with me. Now, as we move through the park, we certainly have a lot to see and enjoy. So we're going to begin our walk just out on East 96th Street, right along 5th Avenue, as we try to conquer about half or more of the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir, which today stretches between 86th Street and 96th Street at its most northern tip. We're going to be actually beginning near that northeastern tip around 96th Street and 5th Avenue. And as we begin our tour over here, I wanted to stop by something that is nearby the reservoir, but a little bit kind of sectioned off. And as we start to enter the park near the 96th Street Transverse Road, we can see exactly what I'm talking about that's so sectioned off. Now, as we come around the bend, we can find an interesting little welcome to the park. But as we move a little bit closer, we notice this sign which says, "This is not a park entrance." Looks like a park. The reason this sign is here is because if we look at a map, we can notice this little triangular section of the park we're currently entering. This little section is actually bisected by the 96th Street Transverse Road, which splits off and also becomes the 97th Street Transverse Road. Because of that, this little triangular section of the park is actually a self-standing, really kind of miniature Central Park. This small little triangular section is cut off by these two roads, making it a fun little kind of hugged portion of the park. And as we walk up, we can see how we're standing just above some of these transverse roads, which give us a glimpse over towards the reservoir, which we're going to be exploring in a little bit. But as we make our way up this path, we can see what lies within this small triangle that is more seldom visited here in the park. What we'll see is, beyond a few beautiful trees, a work of art. The statue that we can come up to is that of Albert Bertel Thorvaldsen. Albert Bertel Thorvaldsen was a Danish sculptor and a medalist. He had a really neoclassicist type of style, and we see this statue really being dedicated to him in 1894. During the 1890s, a lot of Danish people are immigrating into New York, and much like many of the other statues here in the park, people wanted to see their culture represented. So we do eventually see this coming as a gift from Danish Americans that are immigrating over here. We see this being a really beautiful piece with some nice decoration along it. We can see Thorvaldsen's name on the side, as well as some smaller medallions in a bas-relief style of some of his more familiar work. This being a little section of one of his pieces, Day and Night. We can see some beautiful decoration along the granite base, as well as, of course, on Thorvaldsen himself. The picture on the left, we can see some of his tools of trade, such as a mallet, using a lot of different marbles and harder stone materials for his sculpting, but also using some different types of bronze materials as well. But certainly carrying some interesting tools, as well as sporting an interesting model next to him. We'll notice his left arm is actually sitting on a little miniature model of Hope, which was actually created by Thorvaldsen in 1817. This piece, which wouldn't be sculpted and erected here until 1894, certainly has some interesting cues, such as Hope and the medallions we can see along this area. As we take a step back, we can enjoy this very subtle but relaxing section of Central Park, one that's really a subsection from the rest of the park, but really a beautiful area that we seldom visit, that we can say hello as we come by. As we start to exit this little triangular section, we can make our way back into the larger part of the park near the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. And as we're making our way up to the reservoir, I do want to launch our first poll, which is of course a reservoir themed poll. That's a lot of water. I want you to guess how much water is held in the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. While everybody's voting in that, I'll continue us into the park, bringing us up now into a larger section of the park, up this nice little ramp in the sun, and glancing just over to our left where we can see a lot of people enjoying the warm weather we're having. This being the view of the East 96th Street Playground, also known as the Margaret L. Kempner Playground, one of the largest of Central Park's 21 playgrounds, which would receive some nice restoration work around 2019. As we continue past the playground, we'll cross the street just momentarily and make our way that much closer to the reservoir. As we come by though, we can enjoy some of the evergreen shrubs that are adding a little color to this landscape, such as one of my favorites, rhododendron. Rhododendron having very many different types of cultivars or varieties, meaning we can see a lot of different color coming from rhododendron and a lot of different timed blooms, ranging from spring all the way to late summer, adding a little bit of color all around the park. And an area right nearby us here at the reservoir is known as Rhododendron Mile, one of the best areas to see these rhododendron blooms, starting from the spring and continuing through the summer. As we look a little bit closer, we can really look forward to the future. And once these little buds bloom, releasing different types of purples, pinks, reds, really a whole rainbow of different colors coming from these. We'll have a little bit to wait though, so we'll look forward to that in the future as we continue along. Beyond decoration of natural plants, we also see some really cool architecture around this area. I see this little sewer grate, which really just is very decorative to me. It reminds me of little flower type designs that we see. And we can actually see a lot of decorative types of sewer grates around this area, as well as very historic ones. You may have remembered in the past when Juan brought us through here, I believe in around October 13th of 2021, Juan brought us around this reservoir area and showed us a pretty cool sewer cover that we can see just along the southeast corner of the reservoir. That little sewer grate rather looks like this, and we can actually see the date on it, 1862, making this one of the oldest still remaining sewer grates that was part of the original 1862 reservoir here in Central Park today. That is today rather known as Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. A really cool piece of history that we tend not to really look at, but even sewer grates can hold a lot of interesting stories. As we continue making our way back to present time, we can enjoy the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir that we're seeing here today. And as we come up and get a view of this reservoir, I figure it's a perfect time to end that poll and share the results. So we're here today now looking at the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir, which runs from about 86th Street to 96th Street at its most northeastern corner. This wonderfully huge 106-acre area of water is about 40 feet deep and contains, drumroll, over 1 billion gallons of water. So the last answer on there, which I see about 17% of us guessed, is going to be the correct one. But of course, no wrong answers. Certainly a lot of interesting things to learn about here in the park, such as the 1 billion gallon Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir, as we call it today. Certainly a lot of water existing in here, and again, about 40 feet deep. That other little sewer grate that we just recently saw that Juan shared back in October of 2021 is actually used in case this reservoir were to get overfilled or overflow. The water spilling over the edges would eventually make their way down to sewer grates like that, which drop about 42 feet below and help to disperse some of that flooding water. But really cool. Stop sharing that results, and I will share another one in just a little bit. Now, as we continue along, though, we can enjoy, again, the beauty that we have of the current Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. This reservoir is never meant to be really a full supply of water like the original Yorkville Reservoir that once existed where today's Great Lawn is. This was really just meant to be a supplemental supply of water that would help hold New York over while some of the other water systems and pipelines underwent regular maintenance and construction type of work. We would see this reservoir eventually making its way to this area of the park between about 1858 and about 1862. Coming up now, the Bridal Path, we can walk up a little bit farther, and what we'll notice is there's not only a lot of water around this area, but a lot of really tall, towering trees, such as one of my favorite London planes in the entirety of the park, this one that is found on the northwest corner, or the northeast corner, rather, of the reservoir. This huge London plane is one of the tallest trees in the park that I personally know of, and it's really an amazing one to see. Of course, pictures don't do it really the justice that it deserves, but coming up close, we can at least admire the beauty of this tree. Its trunk being at least about 16 to 18 feet in width and really just a diameter around, but really or circumference around rather, but really an amazing tree trunk. And as we come closer, we can enjoy some of the beautiful patterns that the London plane bark shows. London planes being a very common tree in the park and really any city throughout the world, these trees being crosses between Oriental planes and American sycamores, but providing that beautiful yellow, green, sometimes lighter colored patchy bark, which flakes off, helping to, of course, grow the tree, but also dispel some of the many types of automobile fumes and toxins that it takes in. As we make our way around this very large, beautiful tree, we can start wrapping now down towards the southwest side of the reservoir. And as we make our way down, we can jump off of the Bridal Path and start making our way down along the edge of the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. Now, this reservoir was again originally started around April 1858 and finished by about 1862. While this was being planned, it was actually suggested by the Croton Aqueduct Board president, Nicholas Dean, who suggested that the Central Park landscape that was being proposed be constructed around this reservoir. And of course, we'd eventually see it being constructed up here, getting the shape that it has from an underground water source known as the Sawkill. The Sawkill being really one of these largest underground watersheds in Manhattan, one that's been existent for a while, and one that was really taken its shape from. We see the shape of the current reservoir really being a direct tracing of this underground water source that was once discovered back in the 19th century. Or actually, sorry, earlier than that, actually discovered as early as the 18th century. As we walk around the President Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir today, though, we can see what look like maybe pieces of trash floating in the water. Luckily, that's not trash. It's one of the many types of waterfowl that utilize the reservoir during winter. It's like that famous quote from Catcher in the Rye, "Where did the ducks at the pond go when it freezes over?" They come up here to the 1 billion gallon reservoir that rarely ever freezes over and provides a lot of food and shelter for countless species of waterfowl. Some really cool ones exist here, like these male and female buffleheads. This photo is one that is coming from the Oregon Zoo, showing us a male bufflehead on the left and a female bufflehead on the right. Really fun little diving ducks that we can see coming into the reservoir. Very small in size, but certainly very sturdy birds that can spend quite a long time underwater. And as we look out at these birds, we certainly get some fun little enjoyment and entertainment. But in the flash of an eye or the blink of an eye, these birds will dive down underwater, being gone for upwards of 30 seconds or longer, catching little different types of fish and microinvertebrates that they might find underneath this water surface. As we make our way around, we can let these birds eat a little bit, some of the many waterfowl that call the reservoir home during this time of the season. And as we come around, we can come to the north pump houses. We'll see two pump houses or gatehouses on the north side of the reservoir and one on the south side. These gatehouses serve various different uses, but largely what they do, one will hold machinery that will help control the flow of water from pipelines up north down here into Manhattan. One of the pieces of machinery will help to control the flow of water filling up the reservoir from those pipes. And then one of the buildings on the South Gatehouse, will control the flow of water from this reservoir area down south. So basically a lot of just different machinery, but really beautiful structures because they were designed by one of the park's creators, Calvert Vaux. So we see Calvert Vaux designing these in really beautiful design, created from Manhattan schist, the bedrock of New York, and featuring some beautiful cast iron railings and gratings. Some of the things we can see on here that are my favorites are going to be some of the floral designs pictured here on the left, as well as the little Croton Aqueduct CA logo we can see pictured here on the right. It's really amazing to see the decoration and detail placed into these features that were created really, really long ago, well over 150 years. As we start to make our way past these northern gatehouses, we can admire just over to the right a favorite bridge of mine in the park, bridge number 28, one of 3 bridges found around this area that are made of cast iron, and the only 3 here in the park that remain unnamed bridges. We won't pay too much attention to this bridge because as we walk down, something is stealing our attention away. Anybody see what I'm talking about? We can actually see in this picture what is drawing our attention away. Might be a little hard though. Give you a hint. It is just up here in a tree. Knowing that it's me talking, you probably realize I'm talking about a bird that's stealing our attention. And as we look up in the trees, we see a really cool bird up here. Now, a lot of people have been coming to the reservoir in the past few weeks or months to see a very special type of raptor that has been hanging around here, a bald eagle that's been nicknamed Rover. Now, this isn't a bald eagle that we're seeing here. In my opinion, it's even cooler than seeing a bald eagle. What we're seeing right here, this little blurry photo might help you out a little bit. Any guesses? It is probably the fastest bird in the world, if I'm not mistaken, and one that luckily will actually call New York City and some of its buildings home. What we're seeing here, this blurry photo that I took, that we can see a little bit clearer here from a picture that I did not take, this picture of a peregrine falcon coming from Mitch Urban from the National Park Service gives a little bit better of an example of what we're seeing as we're walking around the reservoir. We're seeing a peregrine falcon, arguably the coolest type of raptor to find in New York. I personally think they're a little bit cooler than bald eagles, and I think they're a little bit more difficult to see. I see a lot more bald eagles than I do peregrine falcons. These birds are absolutely amazing though. For one, they will do these stoop dives where they'll travel well over 200 miles per hour. These birds are just absolutely amazing. They have so many cool adaptations. One of their adaptations is they have a third eyelid, because you can imagine diving through the air trying to really spear another type of bird like a pigeon or something. It's traveling really fast. You can imagine probably really windy. It's probably getting in your eyes. So the third eyelid of these birds will help to remove debris as well as release tears to make that dive a little bit more bearable. Another really cool thing about them is their nostrils are actually designed to help really send different kind of shock waves of air down through their body so that the intense pressure from a 200+ mile dive doesn't ruin or disrupt their lungs or internal organs. This is actually a design that was used to help design and create the first jet engines. But incredibly amazing birds that we luckily have the pleasure of seeing as we're walking around. I was told that this is a female peregrine falcon that's been frequenting the area. So really amazing sight to see as we come through this area. And here is another little photo that show really the kind of intensity and fierceness, as well as goofiness of these birds. This coming from an anonymous photographer, being an image of a peregrine falcon on a New York City building that I took from the source The Gothamist. But we can see really what these birds are best known for, perching on top of really high buildings before traveling well over 200 miles per hour, diving through the air, hopefully reducing maybe the pigeon population here in New York City. But absolutely amazing birds, and one that we're so privileged to be able to see as we walk around the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. As we start to continue around, of course, I love birds, so why not launch a bird poll? For this one, I just want to ask what your favorite category of bird is to see. A lot of different categories like raptors will include eagles, hawks, falcons, and owls. We'll also see things like waterfowl, which are among some of my other favorites, like a lot of the different duck species that we've seen, as well as other birds, wading birds like herons and egrets, songbirds like about 9 of the 10 birds we see flying around us, or maybe another bird that I didn't mention. And if there is something I didn't mention, I'd love for you to write that in the chat for us. Now, as we continue away from this peregrine falcon, we'll enjoy the rest of our walk around the reservoir, looking up at one of the more famous buildings to sit outside the reservoir, the El Dorado, one where peregrine falcons are known to regularly rest, as well as sometimes nest. As we keep walking along this south edge, or the western edge rather, of the reservoir, we can enjoy some other wildlife features. Looking in the water, I see something floating there. What might look like maybe a moldy or moss-covered tennis ball or baseball is none other than a turtle. Of course, many of turtles calling the reservoir home, although a lot of the birds might be more apparent. On this warm day, we can start to see some various turtle species waking up a little bit. They'll probably go back to sleep for a little bit longer, but while we have a little taste of springtime, we can see some of these turtles becoming a little bit more active along the shorelines of the reservoir. As we keep walking along, of course, more wonderful birds to see. The reservoir is one of the best areas to see waterfowl, being different types of duck species. And here are probably my favorite duck species to see in the park, at least. Hooded Mergansers. Hooded Mergansers, this photo showing them a little bit more clearly, show 2 male and 1 female hooded merganser. And this photo is coming from the Oregon Zoo, just like the bufflehead picture I showed before. But these birds are really amazing. They get that hooded name, as you might have guessed, from that big kind of white tuft or back fan-like area on the heads of the males and females. The females always remind me of kind of having like a cool mohawk, while these males definitely have a big, almost it reminds me of like a pope or a bishop or some type of religious headpiece, but really cool birds that we see coming around. Another type of diving bird that'll dive underwater and be gone for a couple seconds to almost upwards of a minute as they're catching food. But nice little fun birds to see, enjoying the reservoir as we make our way down to our final stops on our tour today. And as we make our way down to our last stop or two, I do want to start to share our last poll. Again, a favorite of mine, birds to see in the park. So I do see that a lot of people, of course, are choosing different types of raptors, which hard to not pick raptors and owls, hawks, falcons, like we just saw. A lot of amazing birds there. But another favorite, of course, are going to be songbirds. Songbirds are the largest category of birds. Cardinals, blue jays, doves, all the noisy birds like starlings and grackles that we see around, as well as plenty of the migratory birds like the about 33 different species of warblers, which will be stopping in the park in the next coming month or two and continuing throughout the summer. So a lot of really great birds to see. And I see a couple people wrote other, so I'd love to see what other types of birds you enjoy seeing. And I'll check the chat after to see what everybody wrote. But let's make our way to our final stop or two on our tour today, coming down and enjoying this beautiful, expansive area of water, getting a little view of that fountain. The fountain was actually first installed in 1917 to celebrate the opening of the Ashokan Reservoir in upstate New York. That fountain was originally created to kind of just be used for more of occasional celebratory features. It actually wasn't meant to be operated regularly and continue running. So it was shut off for quite some time. We actually restored this around 2000, In 2019, I believe, was when we actually got a more major restoration of this to allow it to really remain more constantly running and keep going for quite some time. It's really a great feature to have this fountain constantly running and just add a little bit of extra beauty to this already amazing landscape. As we continue walking down, though, another thing we can always appreciate are really the changes of the park. This reservoir has been here for a while, and hopefully it remains here for quite some time. But it's important to remember a lot of areas of the park change. Luckily, we still have the reservoir here today because of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, who it is named after. We would see this reservoir, which was created as early as 1862, eventually being decommissioned in 1993, and in 1994, receiving the name Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir because of her residence, which was nearby here, her regular use of this area for running, her work on areas like the Municipal Art Board, as well as her work in saving a lot of institutions and really amazing landscapes throughout New York, like Grand Central Terminal, as well as this reservoir, which could have easily been destroyed, taken down, and made into something that's not too fitting to the park. Luckily, we do have this remaining today, serving as a piece of history and providing a wonderful use for a lot of wildlife. I wanted to show this tree, though, which of course is a recent loss, because it is important to remember that not everything is here to stay in the park, and it is important, especially for those natural elements, that we appreciate them while they last, because nothing lasts forever. Much like this tree, but certainly it will find new life as it gets chopped down to wood chips and returns to the park in a different form. As we come down, we make our way to our last stop along the southwestern edge of the reservoir near bridge number 27. Again, one of 3 cast iron bridges existing over here, and 3 of the only bridges in the park to not have names. Bridge number 27 looks very decorative and nice, as we can see along the railings and balustrades of this area. And as we make our way to the top, we can enjoy the view from the top of the bridge, or the arch rather. As we come over to this arch, we can enjoy the top portions, looking over on those beautiful railings. The railings, of course, getting designs from one of the designers of the park, Jacob Ray Mold, who added so much character to all of the bridges and arches in the park. Now, the last time we visited bridge number, I believe it was 24 on the southeastern corner of the reservoir, and I made a little comparison for you of what the railings looked like to me. So I thought I'd continue that tradition with bridge number 27 here, and I'd give you another little animal comparison that I see sparking my curiosity or imagination from these railings. Now, when looking at these railings, I certainly think kind of like the owl we saw last time, but there's something else that's even more so sticking out to me. Something that we could find in the park. Well, maybe not presently, but one thing that we could have found in the park historically, and that is sheep. This certainly sticks out to me as the horns and top of a Dorset sheep, which we can't find in the park presently. But if we were to come into the park 150 years ago, from about 1864 to 1934, we would have found these sheep in Sheep Meadow. Sheep Meadow getting its name from these sheep which once roamed around that landscape, originally titled the Green. We would eventually see these sheep being sent to Prospect Park, but their memory still remains in the park today. And looking at architecture like this, we can certainly get remembrances of their long roam here in Central Park. Now, as we come to our last stop, we can say goodbye to this beautiful Dorset sheep, which came from Farm Business, a wonderful little farm site, which actually has a lot of pictures like this of these prize-winning sheep, but a really amazing picture coming from an anonymous photographer from Farm Business. As we continue past, I want to end with one last sight, a look to the future, to the spring, which is just around the corner. And as we walk around the park, we're getting a lot of warm weather, and we're getting a lot of obvious signs of the upcoming spring season. The one that we see most immediately, of course, this beautiful witch hazel, adding a little bit of stringy yellow color to our walk through the park. And again, reminding us that even though we have a little bit more cold weather to deal with, we have plenty of sunshine, warm weather, and beautiful, vibrant colors just ahead. As we come to the end of our tour, I want to again thank you for joining us and supporting us here at the Conservancy. Again, thank you for voting in the polls, for joining us and making these walks so fun. We certainly have a lot of fun doing them, and we are, of course, going to continue doing them. And of course, we have plenty of in-person tours as well as longer 45-minute virtual programs. So if you want to take the learning even deeper, if you want to learn way more than you learned about in these weekly walks, we'd love to see you in person or on some of our other virtual programs. If you do check the chat, you can find links for some of the upcoming programs we have, like a Statues and Monuments tour tomorrow, a Discovery Walk for families on Sunday, as well as next Thursday, a Belvedere Beautiful View, and plenty of other great tours coming up, like specialty tours we have that are being launched, like our Hidden History Women in Central Park tour, occurring both virtual and in person in the next coming few weeks. So check the chat boxes, our website, centralparknyc.org, to learn more about those programs. Thank you again so much for joining us, though. I will be leaving this open for a little bit longer to answer any last-minute questions that you might have. But from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, thank you again so much for joining us, and stay safe, be well. We hope to see you soon. Take care, everybody.